The galaxy was vast, filled with planets, stars, and mysteries. But in the midst of it all, there was one moment that would change everything for both a human and an alien. It began on a war-torn planet, far from Earth, where the sounds of battle had faded, leaving only silence behind. The skies were dark, covered in smoke, and the land was scared with the aftermath of years of conflict. Amidst this chaos, a young alien girl wandered alone. Her clothes were torn, her body covered in dirt and scratches, but her eyes held a fear that spoke volumes. She had been separated from her family, left alone after the destruction of her home. Her once peaceful life was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. The girl's heart raced as she stumbled through the ruins, her tiny feet making little sound against the cold, cracked earth. She was terrified, but there was no one left to protect her. That's when he found her. The human soldier, a lone survivor of a small military unit sent to the planet for a rescue mission, had been patrolling the area. His mission was clear: find the survivors and bring them back. He hadn't expected to find anyone alive. Yet there she was, a small figure standing in the shadow of a crumbling building, her eyes wide with fear. His instincts kicked in, and despite the chaos that had taken over the planet, he couldn't leave her there. His hand instinctively went to his weapon, but he hesitated. The girl wasn't a threat. She was just a child, lost in a world she didn't understand. "Hey, are you all right?" he called out, his voice calm, trying to sound reassuring. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she took a step back, looking around nervously. The soldier lowered his weapon and crouched to her level, trying to make himself less intimidating. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently, extending his hand. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, she took a hesitant step forward. The soldier's heart softened. She was frightened, but she seemed to recognize something in his eyes, something human. Her small, trembling hand reached out and touched his, and in that instant, a connection was made. The soldier carefully pulled her into his arms, feeling her tiny frame stiffen against him. He could feel her heart racing, but as he held her, he also felt her begin to relax, just slightly. She wasn't alone anymore. He had no idea who she was or where she came from, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to leave her to face the dangers of the world on her own. The human soldier cradled her gently, looking around at the wreckage surrounding them. He couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow for this child, whose world had been destroyed by forces far beyond her control. And as he walked through the ruins, carrying her in his arms, he knew his mission had just changed. He wasn't just saving a life anymore. He was protecting something far more precious. The girl, once scared and alone, had now found a protector in this human soldier. And though neither of them knew it yet, their lives were about to become intertwined in ways they couldn't imagine. On a distant planet, far from where the human soldier had found the lost child, there stood a palace carved into the side of a mountain. The grand structure, once gleaming and majestic, now showed signs of wear, as though the weight of time and sorrow had crushed it. Inside, the alien queen sat alone on her throne, her face hidden behind a veil of sadness. Her name was Azura, and she had once ruled with wisdom and grace. Her empire had been vast, stretching across many worlds, but all of that had been lost in the chaos of war. Her people had been scattered, her allies turned enemies, and her heart had been torn in two the day her daughter had vanished. It had been years since that day. The queen still remembered it clearly, how she had watched as the enemy forces stormed her palace, taking her daughter away from her. Despite her best efforts, she had been powerless to save the girl. The years of searching had drained her, but the hope of finding her lost child kept her going. Azura had sent countless scouts, made alliances with those who had once been enemies, and traveled through distant star systems. Yet every lead had turned into dust, every hope crushed by failure. And now, every night, she found herself staring at the stars, wondering where her daughter was, and if she was still alive. The pain was unbearable. She had ruled with strength and pride, But without her daughter, she felt weak. Azira had never allowed herself to show such weakness in front of others. But tonight was different. She sat alone in her chambers, her face buried in her hands. The tears came without warning, falling freely as she whispered her daughter's name, hoping that somehow, across the vastness of space, her child would hear her. "I will find you," she promised softly, her voice breaking. "No matter what it takes, I will bring you home." Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound at the door. One of her loyal advisors entered, his expression filled with concern. He had seen his queen in many moods, but never like this. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "there is news. We may have found her." The queen's head snapped up. Her heart skipped a beat. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling. The advisor stepped forward, holding out a small device with a blinking light. "A human soldier. He has taken in a child, one who matches the description of your daughter." Azira's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? After all this time, could her daughter have been found? The hope, long buried under layers of grief, began to stir again. She stood quickly, her movements sharp and purposeful. "Where is he?" she demanded. The advisor hesitated, unsure if the queen was ready for this. But Azira's eyes were burning with determination. "Send me to him," she said, her voice steady now. "I must see my daughter." The advisor bowed, understanding that the queen had made her decision. There was no turning back now. As Azira prepared to leave, she felt the old weight in her chest. The pain of loss had never left her, but now there was a flicker of hope. She had come so far. And now, after all these years, she was on the verge of finding her child. As she stepped into the transport, the queen glanced up at the stars. The journey ahead would be long, but she was ready. She would not stop until her daughter was back in her arms. Nothing else mattered now. The young alien girl, who had been lost and alone for so long, had found an unexpected home in the arms of the human soldier. Days passed, and a bond began to form between them. A bond neither had expected, but both needed. The human soldier, whose name was Marcus, had never thought much about the alien species in the galaxy. He was a soldier, trained to fight and follow orders, but this little girl had changed everything. Her big wide eyes, filled with both fear and curiosity, made him realize there was more to life than missions and battles. He had never been a father, but as he looked at her, he felt an instinct to protect her. At first, the girl had only whispered a few words in her strange language, but as the days went by, she began to understand Marcus's speech. Slowly, she started to speak a few words in English, unsure but determined. It was amazing to Marcus how quickly she picked up the language. She was a survivor, strong and capable, even though she had lost so much. Every night, as the stars lit up the sky above, Marcus would sit by a small campfire, teaching her the names of things: tree, sky, water. He would draw simple pictures in the dirt, showing her how to write basic letters. The girl, who he now called Lyra, seemed fascinated by the simple things that humans took for granted. The small moments became their shared memories. Lyra began to smile more, a smile that warmed Marcus's heart. She still had moments of fear, moments when she would curl up in his arms and tremble at the thought of what she had been through. But with each passing day, she grew stronger. With each passing day, she trusted him more. In return, Marcus found himself caring for her more than he ever thought possible. The once solitary soldier, who had wandered the galaxy without a sense of belonging, now had a purpose. Protecting Lyra was no longer just a mission, it was personal. He had become her guardian, and she had become his reason for fighting, not just for survival, but for hope. One afternoon, as they walked along the edge of a small river, Marcus tried to teach her how to skip stones across the water. She watched intently as he tossed a smooth stone into the river, sending it bouncing across the surface. She tried to mimic his actions but failed, the stone sinking straight to the bottom. Marcus chuckled and knelt down beside her. It takes practice, he explained, smiling warmly at her frustration. You'll get it. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes full of determination. She picked up another stone, her tiny hands gripping it tightly. She glanced at Marcus, then back at the water. With a deep breath, she threw it with all her might. The stone skipped once, twice, then sank. But to Marcus, it didn't matter. The effort, the spark of hope in her eyes, was enough. Good job, Lyra, he said, his voice soft and proud. For a brief moment, they simply sat there in silence, watching the ripples spread across the water. Marcus thought about how much his life had changed in the past few weeks. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a protector, a father figure to this lost little girl. And that made him feel more alive than he had ever felt before. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lyra reached up and grabbed his hand. Without a word, she smiled at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, Marcus felt like he wasn't just guarding a child, he was building a future with her. The human soldier, Marcus, had never expected his life to change so drastically. What had begun as a routine rescue mission had turned into something far more complicated. Lyra, the small alien girl he had found, had become more than just a survivor. She had become a part of his world. As the days passed, they built a life together. He taught her more about Earth and its people, while she shared glimpses of her own alien culture. Despite their differences, they understood each other in ways that words could never fully explain. But all of that changed the moment the Queen arrived. It was a quiet evening, the kind of peaceful moment that Marcus had come to cherish. Lyra was sitting beside him, her small fingers tracing patterns in the dirt as they waited for the stars to appear. Marcus was teaching her about constellations when the air suddenly grew still. He felt it, an undeniable presence, as though something, or someone, was drawing near. Lyra froze, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus instinctively reached for his weapon, but before he could make a move, a figure appeared from the shadows. The woman was tall, her presence commanding and regal, with an air of authority that made the hairs on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice firm but cautious. The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Lyra, her expression softening for a brief moment. It was then that Marcus realized this woman was no ordinary alien. She was someone important, someone with power. "Your Majesty," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. The woman's eyes softened further, and a deep sadness appeared in them. "I am Azura, Queen of the Empire," she said, her voice low and steady. "And you have my daughter." Marcus's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit him. This was Lyra's mother. The alien queen had come for her child. He stepped back, momentarily unsure of what to do. His instinct was to protect Lyra, to keep her safe from whatever forces might come to take her. But as he looked at the queen, he saw something that made him hesitate, a deep, painful love in her eyes. She wasn't here to harm Lyra. She was here to bring her home. Azura's gaze turned back to Lyra, who was standing now, her small frame shaking. The queen approached her slowly, her movements graceful and measured. As she knelt down before her daughter, Lyra stepped back, unsure of what to do. For a long moment, the two simply stared at each other. Then, without warning, Azura reached out and pulled Lyra into her arms. The little girl hesitated for just a moment before wrapping her arms around her mother, tears streaming down her face. Marcus watched the reunion in silence, feeling an unexpected lump in his throat. He had come to care for Lyra deeply, but seeing her in her mother's arms made him realize something he hadn't fully understood before, the strength of a mother's love. But as the queen held her daughter, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated. The world around them was changing, and soon he would be caught in a conflict far bigger than he could imagine. For now, though, he allowed himself a brief moment of peace, knowing that Lyra was safe in her mother's embrace. But deep down, Marcus understood that the journey ahead would be filled with difficult choices, and he wasn't sure where it would lead them all. The moment the alien queen, Azira, held her daughter in her arms, everything seemed to pause. The world around them fell away, leaving only the two of them, mother and child, together at last. Lyra's tears soaked the queen's cloak, her sobs trembling through the quiet night. For years, Azira had searched, hoping, praying that one day she would find her lost daughter. And now she was holding her once again. Marcus stood back, watching the emotional reunion with a mixture of awe and confusion. He had never imagined something so deep, so profound, could exist between two beings from different worlds. As he saw the bond between the queen and Lyra, he felt an overwhelming sense of humility. He had played a part in bringing them back together, and for that, he felt both honored and conflicted. Finally, Azira pulled away, her hands gently cupping Lyra's face. She looked at her daughter with eyes full of love, but also with a sorrow that hadn't disappeared. There were many things left unsaid, things that the queen could never explain in words alone. "Lyra," Azira whispered, "I have missed you so much. My heart has been broken without you. I never gave up hope that one day I would find you." Lyra looked up at her mother, her wide, innocent eyes full of confusion. She had been so young when they were separated. So much had changed. The mother she remembered seemed like a distant memory, lost to time and war. But the woman in front of her, the one who had held her so tightly, was real. This was her mother. "I was afraid," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "I was alone." Azira's eyes filled with tears once again, but she nodded. "I know, my child. I know." She gently stroked Lyra's hair. "But you are not alone now. I will never let you go again." Marcus watched from the side, feeling like an outsider to this emotional moment. He had never had a family in the way Lyra did. His life had always been about duty, about missions, orders, and survival. But seeing this mother and child reunited stirred something deep inside him. The love between them was undeniable. Azira turned her gaze to Marcus for the first time, noticing him standing quietly by. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of gratitude in her eyes. She owed him so much. After all, it was his kindness that had saved her daughter. But it wasn't easy for her to feel at peace with this human, a species she had once viewed with suspicion and disdain. She had heard stories about humans, their impulsive nature and unpredictable behavior. Yet here he stood, someone who had taken care of her child, someone who had given her a chance to be a mother again. "Thank you," Azira said quietly, her voice measured but sincere. "You've brought my daughter back to me. I will never forget this." Marcus nodded, unsure of what to say. He wasn't looking for thanks. He had only done what he felt was right. But hearing her words made him realize that his life would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, and he had no idea what would happen next. Would the queen take Lyra away? Would his role in this story end here, or would it lead to something greater? "I did what anyone would have done," Marcus said, his voice low. "I didn't expect to become part of your story." Azira studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered his words. There was more to this human than met the eye. And for the first time in years, Azira allowed herself to feel something other than sorrow. Hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the future was not entirely lost. "Perhaps," she said, "but you are part of it now. And for that, I am grateful." The tension between them remained, but there was a mutual understanding that something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, Azira felt a glimmer of peace. She had her daughter back, and though the journey ahead would be difficult, she knew they would face it together. The night air was thick with tension as Azira, the alien queen, held her daughter tightly in her arms. Lyra, once so small and fragile, now stood before her as a young girl, but the love in the queen's eyes was no different from the day they were torn apart. The reunion was full of raw emotion, tears, soft whispers, and the weight of years lost in the void of space. Yet, despite the warmth, and the connection between mother and child. Something unspoken lingered between them. Azira could see the uncertainty in Lyra's eyes. The child had spent years away from her, growing up in the care of a human soldier. In the time they had been apart, Lyra had learned to trust a different person, someone from a completely different world. Lyra shifted uncomfortably, her hands fiddling with the edges of her worn clothes. She had no idea how to feel. Her mind and heart were caught between two worlds, the world she had known with Marcus, and the one she was now facing with her mother. She loved Marcus. He had kept her safe, cared for her when she was afraid, and showed her kindness when she thought there was none left. But now, standing before the alien queen, the woman who gave birth to her, Lyra felt torn. Marcus, who had quietly observed the reunion from a distance, now stepped forward. He could sense the inner struggle in Lyra. He understood the weight of this moment. He had taken care of her, but he wasn't her real family. His bond with her was one of protector and protector's charge, not mother and child. He wanted to help, but he knew this wasn't his place. The mother-daughter connection was something far deeper than anything he could offer. Lyra, Azira spoke softly, her voice full of longing. I know this is difficult for you. I cannot erase the years that we lost, but I am here now. I am not leaving you again. Lyra looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with both hope and confusion. She faltered, unsure of how to express what she was feeling. She felt a warmth when she was with Azira, but it wasn't the same as with Marcus. It wasn't the same as the safe feeling she'd come to know with him. The years with Marcus had left a mark on her heart that could not simply be undone. Azira's hand gently cupped Lyra's face, wiping away the remnants of tears. I know you've been through so much, my child, but you are still my heart. We will rebuild what was broken. You will see. For the first time, Lyra stepped back slightly and looked between her mother and Marcus. Her gaze shifted from Azira to the human soldier, who stood there quietly, his expression understanding. She had never expected her life to turn out like this. She had never imagined a world where she had to choose between two people who had cared for her in their own way. Azira saw the hesitation in her daughter's eyes. She could feel the depth of the love Lyra held for Marcus, but she also knew that Lyra needed to find her place in this new reality. This was her mother. This was the one who had carried her, protected her as best as she could, and now finally had the chance to be a mother again. It's okay, Lyra, Marcus said, his voice soft but firm. I will always be here for you. No matter what happens next, you're not alone. But you need to follow your heart. Azira looked at Marcus with a new sense of respect. The human had done what few others could ever do. He had given Lyra a sense of security, a place to call home. But now, it was time for Lyra to choose, to step into the life that awaited her with her true family. Lyra took a deep breath. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'm not sure what happens now, she whispered. But I think I need to go with you, Mother. Azira's heart swelled with joy, but there was a deep sadness too. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. They had a lot to rebuild, and trust would take time. But for the first time in years, she felt hope. The kind of hope that only a mother could feel when her child was by her side once more. The galaxy, vast and uncertain, awaited them. But for now, they were together, and that was all that mattered. The days following Lyra's reunion with her mother were filled with conflicting emotions. Azira, the alien queen, had tried to bring a sense of normalcy to their lives, but the silence between her and Lyra spoke volumes. The little girl had returned to her mother, yet something was missing, something that neither of them could explain. Marcus had stayed with them for a few days, unsure of what his place was in this new dynamic. He could see the bond between Azira and Lyra growing stronger with each passing hour, but it was also clear that Lyra was torn between her two worlds. She had spent so much time with him, trusting him to keep her safe. To her, he wasn't just a protector. He was a friend, a father figure. Now she was being asked to step into a life she didn't fully understand, with a woman who had been absent for so long. The queen, Azira, understood her daughter's confusion, but the pull of family was undeniable. She had searched for Lyra for so long that now that she had her back, Azira felt the need to take control of the situation. She didn't want to lose her again, but as much as she wanted to be the mother her daughter needed, Azira didn't know how to bridge the gap between the child Lyra had been and the young girl she had become in Marcus's care. One evening, as the three of them sat together by a small campfire, Lyra spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't know what to do," she said, looking down at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't know if I can leave him." Azira's heart tightened. She knew this moment would come. Her daughter had formed a deep attachment to Marcus, someone she had come to rely on. Lyra had trusted him with her life, and that bond was not something that could be broken easily. Marcus, sensing the tension, spoke gently. "Lyra, you don't have to choose. You've been through a lot. I won't ask you to forget what we've shared. I'll always be here for you, no matter where you go." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Instead, she looked at Azira, who had been watching her silently. The queen could see the pain in her daughter's eyes, the struggle between loyalty to the human who had cared for her and the duty she felt towards her own kind. Azira reached out, her hand gently brushing Lyra's cheek. "My dear, I don't want you to feel torn. You've been through so much already, and I don't want to rush you into making a choice. But understand this, I am your mother, and I will always protect you. The war may be over, but the consequences of it linger. You cannot stay in this world forever." Lyra nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her mother's words. She had missed her mother's presence, but she also feared what would happen if she left the only home she had known in the past years. "But what if I don't fit in there? What if I don't belong?" "You belong with me," Azira said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "And you belong with him too. But there are things ahead that only I can teach you. Things about who you are, about your place in the galaxy. I will help you understand." Marcus, who had been watching this quiet exchange, knew his time was coming to an end. He had done all he could for Lyra, but it was clear that her true path lay with her mother. His role as protector was over. Now he had to let go. "Whatever you decide, I'll always care for you," Marcus said, his voice low and sincere. "And if you ever need me, I'll be there. Just remember that." Lyra gave him a small smile, a sad one, but one that showed gratitude. She knew her heart would always hold a place for Marcus, but it was time to return to her true family. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't stay in the past forever. The battle within her was not just about choosing between two people, it was about finding herself. And, in time, she would. With a heavy heart, Lyra stood up and turned to Azira. She took her mother's hand, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy, but it was the path she was meant to walk. Together, they would face whatever the future held. The days that followed Lyra's decision were filled with uncertainty. Marcus had left, and the silence in the air was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Azira, the alien queen, had tried to fill the space with words of comfort, but even she could feel the weight of their new reality. She had her daughter back, but there was so much they needed to rebuild. The years they had lost were like a gaping wound, one that couldn't simply be healed with time. Lyra was struggling. She tried to settle into her mother's world, but it was clear she was not the same little girl Azira had once known. She was different now, shaped by the years spent with Marcus. It was hard for Azira to understand at first. How could a human, someone so different from their kind, have such an impact on her daughter's life? But she couldn't deny it. The bond between Lyra and Marcus had been strong, unbreakable in many ways. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle above, Azira found Lyra sitting by the edge of a quiet stream, her legs crossed under her, her eyes lost in thought. The queen sat down beside her, not speaking at first. She knew that Lyra needed time to come to terms with everything. "You've been distant," Azira finally said, her voice soft but firm. I know this isn't easy for you, but you're not alone anymore, Lyra. You don't have to carry the weight of all this by yourself. Lyra didn't look up. She stared at the water, watching the ripples flow with the current. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Azira's heart ached as she listened. She knew the girl in front of her, the brave, strong child who had fought through so much. But now, all of that strength seemed lost in the confusion of what lay ahead. The queen had thought that getting her daughter back would make everything right, but it wasn't that simple. There was no going back to the past. They could only move forward. Lyra, you are my daughter, Azira said, her voice thick with emotion. That will never change. No matter where you go, no matter what happens, you belong with me. You belong with our people. But I understand that you've been through something I can't fully understand. You've formed a bond with Marcus. I see that, but that doesn't mean you have to choose between us. Lyra finally turned her gaze to her mother, her eyes filled with confusion and sorrow. But what about him? What about everything we shared? Azira's hand reached out, resting on Lyra's. I will not ask you to forget what you had with Marcus. But I am your mother, and I know that I can offer you things he cannot. There are things about your past, about who you are, that only I can show you. I will teach you what you need to know. Your journey doesn't end here. Lyra's heart felt torn in two. She loved Marcus, and she would always carry the memories of their time together. But her mother's words struck a chord deep within her. She had been lost for so long, wandering through a world she didn't understand, clinging to the only person who had shown her kindness. But now her mother was offering her something more, a chance to learn about herself, about her true place in the galaxy. I don't know if I'm ready, Lyra admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can leave all of that behind. Azira nodded slowly, understanding her daughter's pain. You don't have to make this decision alone. I am here always. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Lyra looked down at her mother's hand, still holding hers, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the peace of certainty, but of understanding. She didn't have to choose everything right now. There was time to figure it out. Okay, Lyra said finally, her voice steady. I'll stay. I'll stay with you. Azira's face softened with relief, though she knew the road ahead would still be difficult. There would be moments of doubt, moments of pain. But together, they would face whatever came next. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt like she was where she was supposed to be. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to take the next step with her mother by her side. And though the bond with Marcus would always remain in her heart, she now knew where she truly belonged. The days that followed Lyra's decision were filled with quiet reflection. Azira, the alien queen, had welcomed her daughter back into her life, but there was still a sense of unease in the air. Lyra had made her choice. She would stay with her mother, at least for now. But there were still things left unsaid. She had left behind the only family she had known for years, and the bond she shared with Marcus couldn't just be forgotten. Marcus had stayed in the background, allowing Lyra and Azira to rebuild their relationship. He knew he was no longer needed in the way he once was. His role as her protector had ended the moment the queen arrived. Still, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. The little girl he had cared for, the one he had protected from the dangers of the galaxy, was now part of something bigger, something that he could never be a part of. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, Marcus approached Lyra. He found her sitting on a large rock by the edge of a calm river. The soft sound of the water flowing was the only noise around them. She looked up as he sat beside her, her eyes filled with both sadness and gratitude. Marcus, she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know how to say this. He smiled gently, a sad, understanding smile. You don't need to say anything, Lyra. I get it. I'm sorry, she whispered, looking down at her hands. I didn't want to leave you, but I have to go with her. I have to learn about who I really am. Marcus nodded, his eyes distant. I understand. I knew this day would come. But that doesn't make it any easier. For a moment, they sat in silence, both unsure of what to say next. Lyra had grown so much during their time together, and Marcus had come to think of her as his own. The bond they had shared was something special, but life had a way of pulling people in different directions. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice steady. You don't have to apologize. You have your mother now. She's the one who can help you understand who you truly are. You've got your whole life ahead of you, and it's your life to live. Lyra wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to hold back the tears. I'll never forget you, Marcus. You're the one who kept me safe when I thought I had no one. You gave me hope when I didn't have any left. You don't have to forget me, Lyra, Marcus said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. You'll always have a place in my heart, and I'll always be proud of you. I did what I could, but it's time for you to be with your mother. It's time for you to learn the things I can't teach you. Lyra nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She leaned over and gave him a tight hug, her arms around him for a brief moment, a final gesture of the bond they shared. Marcus hugged her back, his arms firm but gentle. Goodbye, Marcus, she whispered. Thank you. Goodbye, Lyra, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I wish you nothing but the best. Always. As Lyra pulled away and stood up, Azira appeared in the distance, watching the exchange from afar. She gave Marcus a nod of respect, silently acknowledging the sacrifice he had made for her daughter. Lyra turned toward her mother, who was waiting to walk with her into the unknown future. She looked back one last time at Marcus, her heart heavy with the goodbye. But her path was clear now. The past, with all its struggles and heartache, had brought them here. And now the future awaited them both. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching them walk away. And though it hurt, he knew that this was the right thing for Lyra. She was no longer the lost child he had found. She was on her way to becoming the person she was always meant to be, with her mother by her side. And as the two of them disappeared into the distance, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done his part. And now, it was time to let go. For the first time in a long while, Marcus smiled. The future was uncertain, but he had given everything for Lyra. He could move forward now, knowing he had made a difference in her life. The days after the farewell were quiet, but they were not without purpose. Lyra, now fully under her mother's care, had started to understand the weight of her decision. It hadn't been easy to leave Marcus behind, but she had made the choice to walk a path with Azira, her mother. Azira had shown Lyra the hidden places of their world, places where the stars seemed to shine brighter, and the land was full of untold secrets. She had started teaching her about the ancient traditions of her people, about the galaxy they came from, and the responsibilities that came with being part of the royal bloodline. But even with all of this, Lyra couldn't escape the memories of the time she had spent with Marcus. They were precious, a part of her that would never fade. Azira noticed the quiet moments where Lyra would look up at the stars, her thoughts drifting to a past she was trying to leave behind. The queen understood. She had been there herself, torn between duty and love, between the family she had lost and the new responsibilities that awaited her. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the sky with shades of purple and orange, Azira and Lyra stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the vast landscape below them. The air was cool, and the wind carried the scent of the earth, a reminder of the world they were meant to protect. "Are you happy here, Lyra?" Azira asked, her voice gentle as she turned to her daughter. Lyra hesitated for a moment, searching the queen's face. "I don't know," she admitted. "I miss him. I miss the way things felt before. But I'm trying to learn what this world means." Azira's heart softened, and she placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "I understand," she said. "I know it's hard to leave behind the people we care about. But you are not alone. I will help you every step of the way. This world, this kingdom, it is yours too. I want to give you everything I couldn't before. Lyra turned her gaze to the horizon. I just wish I could bring him with me, she said quietly. Azira smiled faintly, understanding the depth of her daughter's love for Marcus. You don't have to forget him, she replied. You've carried his kindness with you, and that will always be a part of who you are. Lyra nodded slowly, taking in her mother's words. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she was beginning to realize that she couldn't keep looking back. She had to look forward, not just for herself, but for her people, for the future her mother had prepared her for. As the evening stretched into night, Azira and Lyra stood side by side, gazing at the stars. There was peace in the quiet, and though Lyra's heart was still heavy, she felt something shift inside her. The bond she shared with Marcus would never fade, but the life ahead of her was something she could shape with her own hands. It was a new beginning, one that would require strength, courage, and a willingness to grow. Azira's hand tightened gently on her shoulder, and Lyra smiled up at her mother, feeling a sense of belonging she had never truly felt before. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer alone. She had a family now, and though the future was uncertain, it was hers to face. And with that, as the stars began to twinkle brightly above, Lyra felt a sense of hope. Hope for the future, hope for her people, and hope for herself. The road ahead was long, but with her mother by her side, she was ready to walk it. Together, they would face whatever the universe had in store.